Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the first in our Social Impact Leaders Speaker Series. My name is Dr. Pathik Pathak, and I'm the Director of the Social Impact Lab. And our mission is to cultivate world-class leadership for social impact. The Social Impact Speaker Series has been generously funded by our alumni, and our aim is to showcase world-class social impact leadership from around the world from a diverse range of sectors. Tonight, we are delighted to kick off our series with a globally recognized and outstanding social entrepreneur. Our speaker is the founder and CEO of the Red Dot Foundation Safecity, which is a platform that crowdsources personal experiences of sexual violence and abuse in public spaces.
I never told anyone about that day. I was 13 years old. I was shocked. I didn't know what was happening to me, but I felt it. A man in the train, a complete stranger, touched me in a way that I knew was wrong. And I didn't say a thing about it. In fact, this happens every day in every city in India and around the world. So Safecity was created as a safe space where women and girls could share their stories anonymously. These stories are then collated as location-based trends, which we could then visualize on a map as hotspots and put out into the public domain. Women could use the same information to make better choices for their own safety. This is a new data set that the police don't have. We presented it to them and they changed their beat patrol and that actually dropped the crime rate. The more stories we get, the more change we can make, helping to make every city a safe city.
Since Safecity started in December 2012, it's become the largest crowd map on the issue in India, Kenya, Cameroon, and Nepal. She is an alumnus of the Stanford Draper Hill Summer School, the US State Department's Fortune Program, and the Commonwealth Leadership Program. She's also a fellow with Rotary Peace, Aspen New Voices, Vital Voices, and a BMW Foundation Responsible Leader. She's listed as one of BBC Hindi's 100 Women and has won Female Entrepreneur of the Year Award, the Government of India's Women Transforming India Award, and the Digital Women Award in Social Impact by She the People. Recently, she was awarded the Global Leadership Award by Vital Voices in the presence of Hillary Clinton. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage the brilliant Elsa da Silva.
Very long ago that I started Safecity in response to the horrific gang rape of Jyoti Singh on a bus in Delhi. And for the first time, I remember my friends and I started to share our own personal experiences, which until then, none of us had spoken about it. In fact, I was reminded of my own experiences, including the one on that bus as a 13-year-old. When women, 1 in 3 women, around the world experience at least once in their lifetime some form of sexual assault. 80% of us choose not to talk about it, not to report it officially. And to me, that is a major problem because what happens is on a daily basis, we normalize this kind of sexual violence. Often, many of us think of sexual violence as assault or rape, which is at one end of the spectrum of abuse. But on a daily basis, we ignore the verbal and non-verbal forms of it, whether it's staring, leering, ogling, stalking, taking pictures without permission, touching and groping. And we think it's too trivial, when in fact it could be extremely debilitating to many, limiting our choices, limiting our movement, our opportunities, and affecting our mental health. Sexual violence is a global pandemic, yet we treat it like it doesn't exist, like the people who experience it don't matter, our feelings don't matter. And this under-reporting and under-communication of the issue has made the issue invisible making it difficult for women and girls to talk about it, to report it, and for law enforcement to act. And as a result, the official statistics do not reflect the true nature and size of the problem. So, to bridge this data gap, I quit my job in the aviation industry and founded Safecity. Safecity is a platform that encourages people to share their personal stories anonymously of sexual violence in public spaces. And these stories are then collated as location-based trends visualized on a map as hotspots. And the aim is to have it in the public domain so that we can use this information to make better choices for our own safety at the individual level by improving our situational awareness. Or if we can get our communities to rally around and find local neighborhood solutions and hold institutional service providers accountable in doing a better job. And since we started a little over 4 years ago, we have close to 11,000 stories, not only from India but through my partners in other countries like Kenya, Nepal, Cameroon, etc. We also had 3 interns who came to us as part of their internship with the Social Innovation Lab, and they want to start a Safecity chapter in Southampton, which I'm really pleased about. Now, what these stories on our map clearly indicate some men's deep lack of respect for women of all backgrounds in public spaces. And while every woman should have the right to be in a public space and the same ability as a man to lead her life, that's not often the case. Social norms dictate in many places that women are second-class citizens, and some of the men's treatment of women corroborate that. So a large part of our work is actually addressing these attitudes and challenging the social norms, inviting men and boys also to be part of the solution. And this is not an India issue alone, it's a global issue. But in India, the attitude of looking away and overall devaluing women is steeped in a deep patriarchal culture, where women and girls actually have very little say in their lives. But what we found is that data can actually help. We use these stories that women and girls share to identify factors that lead to behavior that cause such violence and help us think through strategies for their solutions. And using this information, we have successfully engaged over 400,000 citizens, police, municipal and transportation authorities in India and abroad. I'll give you an example. One of the hotspots on our map was in Delhi on a busy main road where women and girls would pass by a tea stall, men would loiter there, it being a male-dominated space. And whilst they were having their tea, the men and boys would stare and comment on these women passing by. And so when we presented this data back to the community that this is a hotspot, this is the main issue, what would you like to do about it? They said we would like the staring to stop. Now how do you address that in a culture where you cannot confront a man very easily? So we organized an art workshop and they painted staring eyes and subtle messaging, which loosely translates in English to look with your heart, not with your eyes. And those staring eyes on the wall mural was so effective that it had an impact on the community. The men and boys stopped their staring and loitering, and the women and girls could very conveniently and without any fear for their safety walk to school, college or work. So changing cultures of violence is partly about policies, but it's also about giving people a voice. By making it easy for them to report, transparently showcasing this data, you can hold institutions accountable. We have several examples where on presenting the data, police have changed beat patrol timings, municipal authorities have fixed street lighting and made safe public toilets available. And our partner in Kathmandu, Nepal, was able to convince transportation authorities to issue women-only bus licenses. So as you can see, my journey over the last 4.5 years has not been very easy. But I think a deep sense of personal belief, a willingness to collaborate, and a passion for gender equality has seen me thus far and helped me scale Safecity not only in India but also abroad. And if you believe, like I do, that every public space should be safe for women and girls and they should not fear for their life, then I would like to invite you to join me on this journey in making every city and every country a safe place for women and girls. Thank you.
That was incredible talk and to hear about your journey. It sounds like it's been quite a difficult one. Is there one moment or one phase of your journey which you characterize as being the most difficult, and which part of it was that?
Well, I don't think, so let me put it this way. I'm a person who loves challenges, and if I am given a task, I find a way to do it. So, but to be honest, the most challenging part was right at the start, because I made a career switch after a very long time. So I spent almost 20 years in the aviation industry. I started off as a flight attendant, and then my last portfolio was vice president of a very strategic department called network planning, where we plan the route network of the airline for one of India's largest airlines. And so it was a great job, but I was trying to find my purpose. And so when you're making that career switch, you know, you're like in your prime, like I was 40 years old and I'm starting afresh. I had absolutely no clue about social entrepreneurship or how I was going to make, you know, anything out of Safecity, like an organization, or how I was going to raise funds, or how I was going to make it a sustainable organization. And therefore the uncertainty made it a little scary at the start. But you know, I mean, you find the help that you need along the way, you find the mentors, and you experiment, and which we can talk about, and you find your path. And as we went along, the challenges were different, but really I think it's making that conscious decision to give up something and start afresh was the most difficult.
Linked to that question, if you could do anything differently, what would it be? And I mean, and related to that is this idea of, do you regret anything, or is regret something that, as an entrepreneur, you just can't have?
I believe life is a journey. So I don't regret anything. I had a great corporate career, and I've had a great social entrepreneurship career for whatever period of time I've been doing this. And whilst I don't have any regrets, what I would like to you know, remind myself and give advice is be better prepared. I mean, you can't be better prepared because you really don't know what you're going in for. But you know, there are people out there who've done it before. Like now, I am one of them. So you can avoid some of the things. Like for example, one of the things that I always tell people is make sure that you have some kind of income, because it's going to take you 3 years to break even. So that's one. And it's a very important thing, because whilst it's all great to go and follow your heart and follow your passion and do good for the world, how are you going to survive? The second is, don't be afraid to ask for help, because help is always available. It's just that maybe the person you're asking for can't really help you, but if you put it out there, you may meet someone else who can help you, and you never ever thought of that person as being the one to do so. The third is, you know, be clear about what is it that you want in your life. This passion for gender equality is the one that sees me through. It's the one thing that I'm so focused on at the moment that no matter where I go, what I'm doing, everything is linked to it. So, you know, I mean, even on my Facebook profile or my Twitter profile, there can be no confusion on what I stand for. So if you're clear about that, I believe it makes your path easier.
I think what comes across about your character is that you're pretty fearless. But what, if anything, scares you?
I feel like I have this huge responsibility to deliver, and I have to remind myself that I'm just one person and I can only do that much. So whatever I do, that's the most I can do. And therefore, never compare yourself or your journey with anybody else's. Just set your own targets and be absolutely practical as to what you can achieve.
How do you manage this tension between knowing where you want to be, having goals, and constantly striving for those goals, but also being content with where you are now? For example, what happens when you fail, when you slip in that road that we were talking about, how you have a vision of where your life will be. But what happens when you find yourself slipping?
You shouldn't fear failure. It's not something that you have to be afraid of, even though, I said that the fear of failure was my biggest fear. When I talk about failure, I mean not being able to deliver. What I do is I break it down into small achievable goals. Because if I have a very large ambitious goal, yes, I do have a large ambitious goal. I want Safecity to be in every country in the world. But can I realistically expect that? I'm working towards it. But maybe I'll do 5 partnerships this year. I'll do 5 countries or 5 cities. Break it down into achievable targets. Another thing is patience. I came from the corporate sector where we had a very fast-paced work goal orientation, and it was you had all the resources at your disposal, being part of a large organization. But when you're starting up on your own, you don't have necessarily the resources. You may have a very small team. I just have 9 people on my team. We don't have money most of the time, because every not-for-profit or a social enterprise, like I said, if you're a small one, you're struggling with your cash flows in the beginning, and then afterwards, you don't have a lot of money to play with. Have a clear vision where you want to take your organization. What is your team strength along with your own strengths? And then how can you complement it with other resources? So for example, we are 9 people, but at any given point in time, we have 50 to 100 people volunteering with us. So technically, we are not 9 people, we are actually 100. We don't have money, but a lot of things can be done without money, with people's time, skill and effort. So we kind of outsource it to those who want to help us. So you think out of the box, you think creatively, how can you achieve your goals even with the resources or the team or the time that you have?
It feels a little bit like a dam has burst. Are you optimistic for the future, or do you think sexual harassment will continue because of structural and systematic reasons?
I'm an optimist. So I think we are at an inflection point, just like we were in India, the movie that I showed you at that point in time. So how many of you are following the Me Too campaign on social media? Okay, a lot of you, right? How many of you have shared your stories? So for me, I think, yes, the conversation has started. Yes, it's put a spotlight on the issue, but there's a lot of work left to be done. One, on raising awareness, on the entire spectrum of abuse like I showed you. The second one is creating safe spaces to actually talk about it. Because I have a lot of friends who put Me Too on their social media but no story accompanying it. That to me is very telling, because they don't feel comfortable sharing their story. So and one of the challenges we have with Safecity is actually getting people to break their silence. The hardest thing was to get those 11,000 stories, nothing else. And when will we reach a stage where we can openly talk about it, openly discuss it, and then find the data to actually find the solutions. And once we have the data, we have found it's very easy to implement the solutions because police don't dispute it. Communities suddenly feel aware, and in my country, this data is not available. If you wanted it, you would have to make what is known as a right to information application to every police station. And even then, you would get it at a high level, that is the city level, at an aggregated level. You won't get it at the street level. So you can't really use that information. But the kind of information we are trying to collect, what happened to you, where did it happen, date and time. We are not asking you for name or email, we are not asking you for the name of the perpetrator, nothing. But knowing what is happening where helps you understand what is it about that location that makes it the comfort zone of the perpetrator. Can you change that? It's really a new way of looking at the situation. And we have so many examples where students like yourself suddenly say, oh my God, I thought it was only happening to me. I never knew it was happening to all my other friends. And that to me is a perception shift. And when you can remove yourself out of the equation and look at the issue differently, hopefully you may be motivated to find a solution. How many of you use TripAdvisor? How many of you use Yelp? And you know, on a daily basis, we use many peer review sites, whether it's, you know, for a movie we want to watch or a book we want to read. But why don't we do it for our own safety? I don't think you should be afraid of coming to India. But the first step is knowing what you're in for, right? And if you knew that this particular place, groping was a problem, maybe you could be better prepared. For example, you could have your pepper spray ready with you. You could have your mobile phone fully charged with an SOS app. You could go with someone. You may choose your mode of transportation. There are n number of things that you can do. But being unprepared is totally, you know, not going to help you or anybody else. And I believe that situational awareness is absolutely the key. Second is community. We all are part of several communities.
We came to the conclusion you don't have a typical day. So given that you don't have a typical day, how do you manage to practice self-care and ensuring that you're always performing at your best and looking after yourself?
Well, one is accepting your reality. So whilst everyone would like to live a particular life, the truth is you are given what you are given. But when you're a social entrepreneur, I think you have a little more flexibility than in a corporate career. Now that I've spent time in both, I can honestly say that. Yes, this is my own organization, so I work really hard to make it well known, to make it sustainable. But what I did was, there were a few things that I did when I made that career switch, and a lot of things that I do now. So one was, I promised myself that I would have more control over my time. And the second was that I would do things that was interesting, where I was learning a lot and where I was giving back. So I'm happy to say that yes, I'm doing that. And in order to do that, I integrate my life and my work. I'm living my dream. There are a few things that are non-negotiable. One is I spend time with my family. So I'm not married and I don't have children of my own, but I do have a brother and sister who have children. They don't live in India. One lives in Singapore and one lives in Australia. So you can imagine that just keeping in contact with them could be challenging, but we find a way. I try to talk to my 3 nieces almost on a daily basis. That is one. So I make the time, I make the effort. And technology allows you to do that. The second is, I don't have a daily routine, but I do block off time on my Google Calendar for maybe I may want to watch a movie, I may want to watch a play. So I don't feel guilty about it, right? If I'm feeling tired and I want to take an afternoon nap, I just go ahead and do it. So you have to also recognize what your body is telling you, be attuned to it, and just accommodate it in your schedule. And that's how I integrate my life and my work, and I don't have separate compartments or separate days for it.
final question from me before we throw it open to the floor. This is a series about leadership. So, what does leadership mean to you, Elsa?
Leadership to me is, knowing when to step back and also giving space to people to express themselves. So for me, it's not about me. It's about me creating those opportunities for the people around me and getting them to be their own leaders. So we work a lot with youth. Most of my team are, very, very young. And my job is to mentor them, to give them that space to find themselves, to make the mistakes, to think creatively and out of the box. And if they want to move on, to let them move on. So, but leadership to me is about creating those spaces and really creating, a movement where people feel aligned with your value system.
We are now going to take questions from the floor.
Hello. I'm just wondering, so on your journey so far, have you encountered any sort of resistance? And if so, how have you overcome that or managed to deal with that?
I don't have space in my mind for negativity. So when we use words like failure, resistance, I can't think of that. But for me, it's like about finding the solution. So if something's not working out, I think, okay, what next? So for example, police. You would think that the police would be the hardest group to present the data to. Actually, they weren't. Because we found that with just 20 data points in a 6-month period, we were able to convince them to change their, vigilance, timings and sequences. And even when they have said that this data does not exist and it's not in our records, we said, okay, have a look at it and then tell us what you can do about it. And they actually withdrew their public statement in another case, and started working with us. So even if initially you find that somebody doesn't agree with you, my philosophy is, okay, find the common ground. Never take an offensive view or stance where you will put them off and alienate them completely. Try to find the middle ground where you can work with them. And it may be just a small thing to begin with. Nothing big. So for example, to give you an example, I found it very difficult to work with the women's movement because I don't come from the women's movement. So here was a newcomer trying to work on sexual violence in response to that horrific gang rape. There were so many initiatives that started and fizzled off along the way. And I do understand that, the traditional NGOs always view newcomers with a little bit of suspicion, wondering, are you really serious? We've done all the hard work to get us till here. Now you come onto the scene, right? I knew that I was serious. They didn't know I was serious. And so I found that they didn't want to collaborate. But did that stop me? No. Every opportunity I got, I reached out to them. They ignored me. Then they said, okay, let's do a tweet chat. That's a chat on Twitter. Okay, let's do that. Then let's do a panel discussion. And then now, it's reaching a stage where we might actually partner on a proposal, where we do work in the community. So you have to find that common ground and not give up easily and find different ways to, work with them if they are an important stakeholder. And then if they are not important at that point in time, don't waste your energy. If somebody doesn't want to work with me, why do I, have to expend a lot of negative energy just to make them agree with me? So you have to constantly evaluate what should you spend your time on.
Thank you so much. It's just such an inspiring talk. You mentioned that you've gathered about 11,000 stories. Can you tell us a little bit about the people, the women who've given you their stories in terms of their age range, their educational attainment levels, their class caste level? Is it one type of woman or is it many types of women? Who's the oldest and the youngest participant?
We don't collect whether you're a man or you're a woman or a transgender. We don't collect your age, your caste, your background, nothing. And the reason being, we wanted to keep the form very simple. What happened to you, where it happened, date and time, that's it. Why? Because it's so difficult to talk about it that, asking many questions might just put off somebody. But 90% of these reports have actually come through face-to-face interactions. We work a lot on college campuses. So as part of our workshops, when we are doing awareness, we also do a mapping exercise. So some part of it has come from there, young girls. So in the age range of say 18 to 22. We have another large group which is community based, so either it's low income communities in primarily Delhi. So where we partnered with an organization that has convening power in the community. They either ran a self-help group or a gender resource center where people could access legal aid or financial aid, and we integrated our work in theirs and collected these reports. Now they could be illiterate, so we have many ways to report. One is on our web app, now we have our mobile app. We have a missed call. In India, there's this thing called missed call where you call a number, it gets disconnected, we call them back, get their story. People write to us on email or on Facebook and Twitter. We also collect on paper. We give out paper forms and accept that and upload it. So it's a variety of ways. But I would say about 40% has come from the community. About 40% has come through our youth on campuses, and about 10% is through what we call is a public audit. So we invite the public to come with us to audit a public space infrastructure. So we've been doing a series around the railway line in Mumbai, where we talk to people, get their stories, but also ask them questions like, are they aware of the laws? Are they aware of the helplines, existing helplines? And have they ever reported sexual violence? And often they don't know any of the three. They won't report it, they don't know the helplines, and they don't know the extent of the spectrum of abuse, and they don't know the legislation. So as part of that activity, we are not only looking at what could make that space unsafe or safe, but also the knowledge of the people around. And to us that is important because we also want to encourage people to be active bystanders. So a lot of males may not be perpetrators of violence, but they are silent bystanders. How do we get them to intervene when it's happening? If they don't know that what is happening in front of them is sexual violence, they won't do anything about it. If they don't know the legislation that makes it a crime, and then they don't know the number to call if they have to, again, that's something that needs to be corrected. So we want to strengthen the existing systems. So 10% comes from there, and 10% comes from online sources. So we have reports from as far as Kyrgyzstan, Mexico, and some countries but for me, I think if we have a concentrated data set, that helps because you can actually use that data to find solutions.
From a business point of view, how do you make money? What's the business model?
Yes, and that's something that you need to think of right from the start. So when you want to follow your passion and your dream and trying to start a business, what is your revenue source? And since I came from the corporate sector, I was not very familiar with the grants model. Usually when you do social work or in the not-for-profit sector, you write grants. But it takes a long time for your grant application to be accepted. Most of the time it's rejected. And you definitely cannot base your budget on something that I call a lottery. So for me, it was very important to know how much money I was getting, and therefore our revenue model is working with corporates, the space that I know very well. We provide workshops on prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. We provide consultancy on gender issues. And now we work with them on accessing grants, CSR grants, corporate social responsibility grants. So primarily, most of our money comes through that.
What are the main challenges you faced at the beginning of your journey?
When you're setting up an organization, and especially one with a social cause, how are you going to make money? So there are two aspects to it, right? There's a social need which you're addressing, but there's no physical product that you're putting out there. So there's nothing that I can sell. Somebody can buy. So how am I going to make that money? I think that took a long time to crystallize. Who is going to pay for these services? I don't think that women should pay for their own safety or for information regarding their safety. At this point, I don't think we needed a physical location because my team is out in the field. And second is Bombay, the real estate is so expensive. I would rather use the money on, to fund my work. So that means my team has to work from home when they're not in the field. And a lot of people can't adjust to that. You see, a lot of people need to go to an office, need to interact physically with people, and so it takes a different mindset when you have to work from home. So, it's all these pieces together that I have to look at, not just about solving the problem of sexual violence, but also about my organization. How do I raise the money? How do I motivate my team to show up to work even if it's not physically showing up every day? And then, how do we get people to become aware when you don't have a marketing budget? So that's why we are all over the place on social media. And I have to talk about that because social media is your friend. It is a free tool. And if you use it in the right way, you can reach a lot of people. On Twitter, our handle is Pin the Creep. We have close to 180,000 followers. And we built that following through collaboration. We don't tweet from that handle. We invite people like you to take over our handle from a Sunday to a Saturday, that's a week at a time, and tweet on sexual violence or gender equality from your perspective. What it does is, it frees up a resource of mine who has to constantly look at Twitter, but it gives me access to all your networks. So when you, say for example, take over our handle, we get a fresh perspective on the issue. We get access to your networks because you're telling your friends, hey, I've taken over the Pin the Creep handle, come join the conversation. And that's how we've got to 180,000 followers. If you look at any other organization that does similar work, they are nowhere close to us. On Facebook as well. And we now have people like DFID, that's the UK aid, following us. I have ambassadors, high commissioners, and other important people tweeting and retweeting and following my work. So you build your thought leadership in that space, whatever that space is. And you can do it through social media. And there are different kinds of media. So the way you use Instagram is different from Twitter, from Facebook, from Medium, from whatever, Snapchat. So you need to think about each of these channels and use it in the right way. But it's free and you can use it.
So, can you elaborate upon how you work on masculinities and with men about this challenge?
If you're familiar with India, you'll realize that, actually we are quite segregated. So women sit separately, men sit separately, our transportation is segregated. And we don't often talk about sexual violence in any case. So how are the men and boys going to hear about it? So we create spaces for this dialogue. So that's one. And it really makes a difference, because now with the Me Too hashtag on social media, I had so many of my male colleagues or ex-colleagues calling me up and saying, we had no idea it was such a big problem, So that is one way of creating those discussion spaces. We create volunteering spaces. So 50% of our volunteers, for example, are men and boys. So they give their time to contribute to the cause because they want to contribute. They want to make the world a safer place. They just don't know how. So they blog for us, they run social media, they do data analytics. Some of them help me with the tech. Even the on-ground teams comprise of men and boys. So we never say no. We invite them. And imagine if they are working on the data, for example. They are reading those stories. So it's hard for them. I think it would be hard for them to perpetrate violence. How could they? You have to have something in here, right?
I wanted to end the questions with a final question from me. And the question is, if you were to give the 20-year-old Elsa some advice from your journey, what one piece of advice would you give?
So as a 20-year-old, I think I was a very serious person, you know, and it was only later in my life that I started to enjoy my life and be more grounded in the present moment. So what I would tell my 20-year-old self is that it's going to be okay. Life is going to be okay. Given you will have your ups and your lows, you know, your highs and your lows throughout your journey. Just stay grounded in the present moment, enjoy yourself, find the people you are happy, you know, surround yourself with people you are happy with. Find the meaning in your life by defining your values, and yeah, do what I won't say do completely what your heart says, but you know, use a bit of combination of head and heart, and don't feel afraid to take some risks in life.